Hello there, my name is Cassius. I'm the creator of ncc-1031.com. That's a Star Trek Discovery fan site where we cover all the latest news and rumors and opinions surrounding the television series. Today I'm going to be doing something different, something I've never done before, and that's a video review of an episode of Star Trek Discovery. I'll be reviewing episode 8, named Vi Pacem Bellum, and I may have brutalized the pronunciation of that. But it's a very difficult title to figure out. It's a little pretentious, I found, to be honest. So just really quickly, what the episode was about. We have the crew of the USS Discovery attempting a rescue operation on another Starfleet vessel. And meanwhile, we have Commander Saru, Lieutenant Tyler, and Specialist Burnham performing an away mission on the planet Pavo. What I liked about this specific situation and having these characters on Pavo is that they're actually performing some science, which is something that I haven't really seen a whole lot of on Star Trek Discovery just yet. But it's something that Star Trek has definitely traditionally done. Unfortunately, in the case of this episode of Star Trek Discovery, the science isn't really being done in the sake of science. It's more being performed in hopes that it will further their war effort. The ultimate goal being to be able to decloak Klingon starships in some way or form through this naturally occurring element on the planet Pavo. We also catch up with the Klingons again, who have been pretty busy implementing cloaking technology within their fleet. This is being led by General Cole, who is currently in command of the Klingon sarcophagus ship. We also catch up with Admiral Cornwell and the Klingon Laurel as well, who comes aboard and requests to interrogate Admiral Cornwell for Cole, which he agrees to. On planet Pavo, Saru has some interactions with, I guess it's kind of a life form that exists on Pavo. In the episode, they kind of talk about it as not being separate from the planet itself, so perhaps there's this collective consciousness on the planet. In any event, Saru has been interacting with it, and it seems to have given him some peace, which is something that he's never experienced before in his entire life. His species, the Kelpians, are a prey species, and on his planet, as he says, it's a binary. Either you are prey or you are a predator. So his entire life he's experienced fear every moment of his entire life, and so this is the first time that he's ever felt fearlessness because of some interactions that he's had with this entity on Pavo, and it's really seemingly changed his personality. As we find out later in the episode, it's not that it has really influenced him so much in that it's possessed him or anything along those lines. It's more what that character of Saru would be like if he wasn't in a constant state of fear. So my quick take on the episode, and I'll just start off by saying that I wasn't a huge fan of it. It certainly wasn't the worst Star Trek episode, but probably middle ground. I'm going to give it a 3-star out of 5. So just covering the episode from the beginning, it starts off with lots of action, which is unusual for a Star Trek television series. But we finally get to see what the USS Discovery's actually been up to all of the time. We keep on hearing about it fighting battles against the Klingons, but we never really actually see it. And this time we actually get to see what it's been up to week to week in the war effort. They are tasked with attempting a rescue mission on the USS Gagarin, which is engaged with a number of hostile Klingon ships at the time. They don't actually end up saving them. I guess they arrive a little bit late, or reinforcements, Klingon reinforcements appear, turn the odds in favor of the Klingons. I'll say the visuals for this sequence were perfect. They were top shelf. But as already mentioned, most of the episode focuses on the away mission of Commander Saru, Lieutenant Tyler, and Specialist Burnham. And they are down on the planet trying to figure out a naturally occurring frequency or transmitter or something like that exists on this planet. It seems to be a combination of organic material like plant or tree mixed in with crystal or something like that. Somehow the combination of things on the planet creates this transmitter. It's not, I'll be honest, it's not clear at all how this is supposed to help them, but apparently it's going to assist with Starfleet's ability to decloak ships. For me, this episode felt very disjointed because it was neither episodic nor serial. Star Trek Discovery's been trying to do things differently, and that they are writing season-long story arcs, and this isn't something that's really been done in Star Trek before, with the possible exception of Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine did it very, very well, where they sort of integrated this ongoing storyline over a number of episodes, but also had things remain mostly episodic as well. The combination worked really well. I'm not finding that to be the case with Discovery so far, but it is in its first season, and it could still be finding its footing. Only the future will tell. In any event, because we're given what could be considered an episodic episode with elements of this over this season-long story in it, I didn't find that it really had enough time to progress the season-long story far enough for an episode. And at the same time, the episodic elements weren't really enough to sustain the episode on their own, because time was taken away from that trying to deal with the season-long story. So we kind of had both things in there, and I feel like both of them suffered because of it. So what I found cool with the episode was that they're doing a lot of science in these natural settings. They're using natural things to run experiments. So for example, we have Planet Pavo, where there's this naturally occurring frequencies of essentially everything that exists on the planet that harmonize, and they're doing science with that, running experiments. And then we also had the tardigrade, which is seemingly a naturally occurring organic species as well, and they did science on that. They performed experiments on that. Now, I don't like the idea of the tardigrade somehow, in my opinion, magically making this technology work. I still don't think a lot of that is clear, and I don't like it at all, but I do like that they're using the natural environments that they're interacting with for performing science. I think it's something that scientists do in the real world, and because of that, I find these episodes believable in that way. I also like the idea that there's this audible signature sound on the planet that's almost perceived as being musical. I think that's a very beautiful concept, and I was very happy to see that in the episode, and I wish they could have gone into that a little bit further. That said, I realize, of course, that there's a lot of science fiction around, so being original can be difficult. However, Planet Pavo, to me, felt a lot like the moon Pandora from Avatar. I couldn't help but thinking about Avatar throughout a lot of the beautiful CGI sequences of the planet. It wasn't just the appearance of Pavo that made me think of Pandora. There's also seems to be this concept on Pavo of a unified biological network almost that connects the entire planet and gives it I guess a consciousness of some sort. And that just seemed very similar in many ways as well to Avatar, where you have these species interacting with themselves through means other than verbal communication, not just within their own species, but within multiple species that exist on the moon Pandora. Pavo was, compared to many planets in Star Trek, more fleshed out, which is strange to say, because here I am saying that they didn't spend enough time on the planet and that they could have done more with it in this episode. But at the same time, the elements that they did discuss about this planet fleshed it out, in my opinion, more so than a lot of planets get fleshed out in Star Trek. The natural colors of this planet also provided a nice vibrancy, and it was a beautiful juxtaposition, I found, to the ship interiors and battle scenes that we get throughout Star Trek Discovery so far. I find the interior shots on Discovery to be very dull. They're dark. There's not a whole lot of color to them, other than all the lights that are flashing on and off throughout the show. And Planet Pavo, I found, really brought some color into the series. So Saru, Saru's story on this episode, I think, could have been really interesting. But that said, I feel like the actual execution of all of this, it just missed the mark. So during the away mission, Saru physically engages with the Pavo, or the Pavan consciousness, or the Pavan network, in an attempt to communicate with them. The reason he needs to communicate with them is that Starfleet will need permission to use the naturally occurring transmitter on the planet, and to do that he needs to get their authorization. So communication is key. But as a result of the interactions that he has while trying to communicate, and the peaceful state that the planet exists, so let me back up here. Planet Pavo exists within a peaceful state. It seems to have evolved into a point where everything coexists in a completely harmonious and peaceful state. And when Saru engaged in communication with the Pavans, some of that bled over to him. And Saru, being from a species that is constantly in fear, suddenly found himself being fearless, being without fear. And this has never happened to him before, not for a moment. So this is significant and defining for him, a very defining moment for Saru. What would have also been really interesting, in my opinion, to have added into this episode would have been that, yes, we have the Pavan's philosophy bleeding over to Saru, and he's experiencing peace for the first time. But what if his constant state of fear had bled over to the Pavans, who really wouldn't have had the tools? They wouldn't have been equipped to deal with that, having evolved to a point where their entire existence was at peace. They would not have been aware of the concepts, perhaps, that go along with fear, and how would this consciousness, or this planet even, deal with the introduction of fear, something that it hasn't really had to deal with ever since it has evolved past that. So Saru, suddenly he's overpowered with this desire to remain fearless. It pretty much overpowers any logic that he has, any real thought, any reason, almost. And he takes it upon himself to try and convince Burnham and Tyler that they should all just stay on the planet. I do understand what the writers were going for on this. You have this individual that is fearful 24 hours a day, suddenly in a situation where he feels peace, and again, that's huge for that character. And so who knows what lengths he would really go to maintain that feeling. But he's a Starfleet officer, and I feel that right off the bat, that makes him a different caliber than many other people. I felt that Saru's character change was too abrupt, and it was just so far off to the side that it was unbelievable, especially as a Starfleet officer. And on top of that, second in command of what's arguably the most important Starfleet vessel at its time. Then we have the Klingon plot, and it's interesting. There just really wasn't enough of it because of the mix-in with the rest of the episode. So we have General Cole, who's still in charge of the Klingon sarcophagus ship, and he's been distributing the cloaking technology to other Klingon vessels, any of them really that will vow allegiance to him. So this actually makes the away team's mission that much more critical, because they need to be able to find a way to see through Klingon cloaking technology in order to tip the scale in their favor in the war. So seemingly out of nowhere, L'Rell beams aboard Cole's ship and offers her allegiance in hopes of attaining the cloaking technology for her own ship as well. But the allegiance isn't really enough for Cole. He needs something more, at which point L'Rell suggests that, being a master interrogator, that she interrogate Admiral Cornwell, who is on General Cole's ship at the moment as a prisoner. L'Rell convinces Cole that she'll interrogate Admiral Cornwell and bring glory to Cole in this process somehow. But where things start to get interesting in this is that we learn L'Rell is actually isn't really interested in torturing Cornwell, but instead actually wants to help her with an escape in hopes that Laurel can take us, or be granted rather, asylum with the Federation. And the reason that she's trying to do this is that she's developed a real hate for Cole. So Cole has killed a number of the people, family, friends, etc., and she absolutely hates him for this. And so by escaping with Admiral Cornwell and defecting to the Federation, this gives her a chance to reposition herself and regroup and then launch an attack against General Cole. But at some point during their escape, they get found out by Cole, and in order to save face, Laurel and Admiral Cornwell engage in a fight, and we are given the impression that Cornwell ends up dead, that Laurel kills her, and she drags her off into another section of the ship, or her own ship, or somewhere on Cole's ship. And we're left with the impression that she's dead. I don't actually think she is, because later in the episode there's wording between Laurel and Cole that makes you think that Cornwell was not dead and that she had actually escaped the ship or something like that. It really wasn't terribly clear. I've heard people saying that what they were discussing was the fact that Cornwell got out of her interrogation room. I don't know, that part's not clear. And as intriguing as this plot twist with Laurel sort of apparently changing sides is, it's really all we got in terms of advancing the season-long story arc throughout the entire episode, and that's just not enough for a single 47 minutes of content. Even if it is split between a couple of different subjects, that's not enough progress for the main season-long story arc for a full episode. I really feel it's moving along at a snail's pace. One of the things that I found strange, and this goes back to the away mission, was that the Pavins were drawing in the away team to bring them to a specific place so that they could communicate with them. What I found strange, though, was that it brings them to what looks like a campground or somebody's house or something like that, but there really isn't any indication of any species on the planet that would use this kind of domicile. It just felt really out of place. We did get a quick look at Lieutenant Stamets and the negative impacts that the spore drive jumping is having on him psychologically and physically. At one point, he comes out of a jump and refers to Tilly as Captain Tilly. There's no saying if it's something that's just garbled in his head, if he perhaps peered into the future, because we know that there is some strange time situation going on with him when he jumps, or it built into his DNA perhaps. We learned that in the last episode, and perhaps he's seeing the future where Tilly actually is a captain, but that's really unclear. Then there's also the dialogue and story development that's going on with Burnham and Tyler with regards to their personal relationship, and frankly, I found a lot of these scenes boring and actually difficult to pay attention to. They felt really flat for me. I found my attention kind of wandering during this scene, and that wasn't the case in last week's episode, which kind of surprised me, because I remember seeing the trailer for last week's episode and thinking, oh, they're doing, a romance thing between the two of them. How far can it really go? But because of the way last week's episode was formed, they were able to sort of leapfrog a lot of the normal interactions that they might have when starting to build a relationship and end up here instead of here at the end of the episode, if that makes sense. But this week, I didn't really feel a progressive relationship much. They had some conversation about planning for the future that made it apparent that Tyler was looking optimistically at the future in their relationship, whereas Burnham was feeling that their relationship had a shelf life to it because of the fact that she was going to be going back to prison once the war was done. So I really wanted to like this episode. I was really looking forward to it when I saw the teaser. We would finally get an away mission, and that's the kind of Star Trek that I'm used to, the kind of Star Trek that I like. It really is what Star Trek is about, and it's something that's been missing in Star Trek Discovery, which has been a rather dark, space-based television series with minimal interactions with other species. In my opinion, there's been very little discovering actually happening in this show. Again, I give it a 3 stars out of 5. Be sure to check out my written review on ncc-1031.com. You can find it in the news section. My name is Cassius, and I hope you've enjoyed this review.